there was a young boy in the second grade whose teacher sent a note home with him to his parents. And the note said that he was having trouble trying to keep up with the class because all the kid wanted to do was look out the window and daydream. And, I wonder how many children in the world do the same thing and they receive condemnation. Granted, you need to focus when you're in school, but there's something pretty powerful about dreaming. Some of those children have and you probably encountered some, they had these dreams pounded out of them early in life because other people didn't understand. Some of these children, they gave up on dreaming big dreams because, after all, it's not going to happen. And then others of them, they grew up and they had chapters in the Bible written about them, as is the case of a boy named Joseph. We've been looking at him, but I just want to say that here's a kid that, like many others, looked out the windows to view a world that nobody else could see. And they actually see a vision that seems to draw them to see a world that is visible and could be. And in some cases, they go home and they maybe become a pastor like I did. God gave me a dream a whole long time ago. It was when I was 22 years old, and I found Christ. And after I found Christ and began to really dive into this relationship, it's almost as if he now I didn't have a dream, sleep, have a dream. And it wasn't a vision that I saw in the middle of the day, but it was just powerful as that. And it was as if God was grabbing hold of my heart and he was calling me and saying, Dave, you need to walk this way. This way, Dave. And I couldn't escape it, and I tried. I would have people that started coming up to me and say, you should think about being a pastor. I said, no. Not me. Books, me, no. Oil and water. That's me and books. And I had one girl that, as I gave my testimony one night and I did this all ignorantly. I started this college and career group, 20s, 30s, 40-somethings, and I said, you know what we'll do? Our church had a gym. We'll have a volleyball league. I don't really know how to play volleyball, but that's enough people do. We'll have a volleyball league. And so I sent word out to the different churches, and the next thing I know, 80 people are walking in the door. And I was in a panic because I only had enough bagels for 20 people. And so, as these 80 people sat there and I gave my testimony, my story, this one girl came out of the stands, walked right up to me. She looked me straight in the eye and she goes, you got a real gift. What are you going to do with it? I barely knew it. I didn't know what to say. And yet, she doesn't ever remember saying that to me. We talked sometime later, but it was like a spear going through my heart. And that was God. And that was God establishing a dream in my heart that I could go out and make a difference. That this age group that I was working with, we can make a difference. And I knew it. And in seminary, as I went to seminary, and that was another thing, I knew I was never going to get accepted to seminary, so I said, you know what, why don't I just, because these people kept bugging me about it. And so I said, I'm just going to submit an application because there's no way they're going to accept me. I mean, I barely made it out of college. And I think I shared I might even shared it in a message one time, and they said, I get a letter back from them saying, normally we don't accept people with grades like yours, but we think you have the added extra motivation to accomplish a seminary degree, so you are accepted. No, not what I wanted to hear. But he did. God made a way. God said this way, and I just started following him. And in seminary, they told us it's the calling. It's a calling. It's God whispering. It's God giving me a dream. Giving you a dream. It goes by many different words. We can call it a calling, a dream, a vision, but it's for a purpose. And for today, I'm going to call it a dream. And he put a dream in my heart, and it captured me, and I became, on that day, an official dreamer. And today, as we walk through this book of Genesis a little bit, and I've stuck on these chapters, it's long, chapter 37 to 50, I want to talk about this dreamer named Joseph. We've heard his story. We probably all know it by heart, but I just wanted to go in and point some things out. There were several prominent people named Joseph in the Bible. Stepfather of Jesus, another Joseph that loaned out his tomb so Jesus could be buried in it. But this Joseph was just 17 years old, 18 years old. And he became one of the biggest success stories in our entire Bible. And I truly believe that if his story was really told properly to the public, it could be a best-selling book. It could be a box office movie. I mean, think about it. It has love. It has betrayal. It has mystery. Some passion in it. I mean, it has everything of a blockbuster. But it comes from the Bible. So that's probably why people don't look at it. But here's this guy. He goes from a hole in the ground to a palace, to a prison, and then to royalty. He has 12 siblings on a farm that betray him and sell him to be a slave. And then he becomes the second in command of the largest nation in the world at that time. It's a story about a dreamer and how circumstances said no way. But God took those circumstances and said, no, this way. And it all stemmed from this young boy having a very real and true faith in God. And what we'll see today is that God gives us dreams as seeds that he plants in our hearts, and the water that grows these seeds is faith in him. Each one of us has had or has dreams. It's our dreams that sometimes hold these fragile pieces of our lives together and keep us going when we don't feel we have the strength to. So the question is, what's your dream? What does God have in store for you? What does God tell you about your purpose, your calling, where he wants you? Some people will think that your dreams are just fantasy. And they may be if they're born in your heart, not by God, but by your own desires. They might be just fantasy. Sometimes it's hard to tell if it's fantasy or if it's God, because unless you're pursuing the creator of the dreams, God, you're liable to get sidetracked by your own selfish natures. But if God plants a dream in your heart, it is this seed that is just waiting to blossom and to give God his glory that's due him. Through you and through me. It might be as simple as being the best mom that you can be, or being a good wife to your husband, or being a great dad to your kids, or a good husband to your wife. It might be nurturing those kids at school that you interact with every day and influencing them to choose Christ or to think about him. It might be just hanging on in an unfortunate health situation that you find yourself yet with a godly attitude, while you become an example that others look and watch and admire, and it makes them want to be better. So I don't know what it is. I don't know what God has for you. I don't know what dream he wants to plant in your heart. The problem is that sometimes those dreams die and they turn into things like regret. We'll talk about that in a second. My friend Matt found himself in a wheelchair in his early 40s with 4 girls after he suffered a broken neck. And as a quadriplegic, sitting in that chair for the last 30 years, he has been an inspiration and has given so many people, countless numbers, the desire to go on, the desire to want to be better. And the man keeps fighting. The man keeps pursuing God, and he is not shy about telling anybody about his Jesus. He is, in no other words, amazing. And so is his wife, who has stood by his side all these years. There's a special reward in heaven for both of them, because God gave them a dream and they fulfilled it. Sometimes our purpose might be that the dream might be that God says, I just want you to hang in there and trust me and hope in me. And that becomes a dream that nurtures us, that keeps us going. Because he is the key to our dreams. I heard about a story of a young pastor who made friends with his next door neighbor. And the pastor was in his 20s. Young pastor just starting off, and his neighbor was in his 60s, and they liked each other, so they would sit on lawn chairs, and they talked about life in general. And the neighbor's life had been very difficult, and because of that, his attitude had turned kind of sour. And he said to the young pastor, when they got talking about dreams, he said, I have no dreams, but I have many regrets. And the young pastor, who was probably filled with wisdom at that point, he told him that a person never gets old until their dreams are replaced with regrets. And most regrets are caused when we do not follow up on our dreams. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, because I know a lot of young people that have given up on their dreams and they've become very old. And I know a lot of old people that they've not given up on their dreams and they still trust in theirs, and they're very young. Turn with me to Genesis, or you can read it in your handout there, Genesis 37, 1-11. And this is what it says. Jacob lived in a land where his father Isaac had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel, that was what Jacob's name was changed to, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made a richly adorned robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, listen to this dream that I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, and then suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around me and bowed down to him. And his brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream that he had and what he had said. And then he had another dream, and he told his brothers, listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And when he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him, saying, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. They dismissed Joseph's dream as just that. Nothing but a dream. I don't know, a bad piece of mutton the night before, you know. But Joseph, he could have chose to ignore it. He could have chose to say, yeah, you know, you're right. It's just a dream. It was the bad meat that I ate last night. It just... And had he done so, he'd have killed the seed that God planted in his heart. The seed of a godly dream. When it's nurtured, it becomes reality. And this was a dream that God had given him. And the interesting thing is that had he killed that dream, I wouldn't doubt that he might have grown into regret. And God gives us dreams that actually have the ability to shape our entire life. And that's what it was with David, with Joseph. God gave Joseph this dream, and it had the ability to begin to shape him. Joseph was shaped by his purpose, and his purpose was shaped by his dream. And he had no TV, no other distractions in those days. So the family sat around the tent after the evening meal, and they talked. And the fathers would replay the stories that they've told over and over again, that they've heard from their forefathers, and they relay these stories to the kids. And I'm sure that Joseph grew up hearing about how God was active in the life of Abraham as well as in the life of Isaac. And I'm sure he heard about Jacob's life and how God met him and how he wrestled with an angel. And all these stories he kept in his heart. But what they did is they caused that dream to even, churn. And they caused that dream to begin to grow. And he couldn't let go of it now because it was sprouting, you see. It had become part of him. Now, I'm not saying he wanted to become somebody that everybody bowed down to, but it was a God dream that God placed in his heart. And he didn't know what exactly it meant, but what he did know is that God was the originator, and that God had touched him and grabbed a hold of him. Same thing with me, and said when God was calling me, I couldn't neglect it. He pulled at me. It was growing. The more I sought him, the more I dug into the word, the more I tried to get to know God, the stronger that dream became in my heart. As we'll see, Joseph seemed to do what was born out of those dreams, and God was using him to shape the world for eternity too, and he was using him to become the savior of his people. It might sound very simple, almost too simple to be reality, but these simple truths are often the most impacting truths in life. And I think the most impacting truth is that the same God who made you, the same God who saved you through Jesus Christ's death and resurrection, is the same God that has put you right here today to live out a dream of you and him together, influencing people forever. I mean, think about that. You and I have the opportunity to put an eternal mark on others by the way we live our lives, by the way we fulfill the dream that God places in our hearts. We need to be more like a Joseph. He had so much faith in God that there was no way he could have ignored the call that he received from those dreams. He had to pursue them. And even when things got ugly, even when things got so hard, he stuck with it because he had that growing in his heart. The problem with us today is most of us, we quit and we change directions whenever things get rough in life. And we don't persevere for our sake or for God's sake. Today, I just want to bring out 3 points that might help us live out our dream and pursue our purpose. And the first thing that we need to do is, number 1, encourage yourself to be a dreamer. And maybe we can add a word at the end of that. It's not in your handouts. Encourage yourself to be a dreamer again. Some of us were, but we stopped. Have you ever noticed that when you have a dream and that it really uplifts you, it's one of the first things that you do is you tell people around you. You can't keep it in. It's hard to keep a good dream a secret. And I remember when God first planted in my heart a dream to start a new church. Margaret and I had been up, I believe it was in Boston, and there was a big worship time, and there was a lot of gray hair there. But in my mind's eye, I looked up and I saw all these 20 and 30 somethings, and I said, wow. And I didn't, it wasn't a vision, but this is what in my mind's eye. And at that time, at that age, I wanted to impact my generation for Jesus Christ. And because I had been working with all these 20, 30, 40 somethings, it grabbed a hold of me, and I saw all young people. And I said, it could be. And I came home and I was so excited, and I knew it was God. I knew it was God that put that dream there. And I excitedly shared it with Margaret. And she wasn't. It took her about another 6 months. But I was so excited, so I went to some of my friends that were godly men in the church, and I was so thrilled and excited that God had put this in my heart. I shared it with them, and they didn't smile. In fact, some of them discouraged me. And it's hard. It's hard when that happens. And a lot of us, when that happens, we put the dream aside. Now, we didn't. Margaret and I went forward, and we had a good run. It didn't go exactly the way we had planned, but life really does. But God has taught us volumes, and God has brought us through. And there's a lot of people that know Christ now because we did. Now that could become a regret if things don't go the way you would hope they would, or the way you dreamt with your own desire how they would go. But that's not up to you and I. That's just our desire. We need to fulfill God's desire in us. And when we do, as Lois was sharing before, we can have that other perspective, that God accomplished this. Or we can sit there and focus on what didn't happen. And that can become regret. So we got to remember who plants that seed in our hearts. But encourage yourself to be a dreamer. One day, God, who knows our innermost hearts, he gave Joseph this dream. And Joseph's problem was that he lived with a family of dream killers, and he got mocked, he got warned, he got rebuked. It seems that his dreams were okay as long as they didn't step on anyone else's toes. Have you ever known somebody who's lost their dream? They no longer feel any kind of excitement about life. They can't stand to be around people that are excited about life. And in Joseph's case, he had something else going against him in addition to his dreams. He was loved by his father more than his brothers, and that created jealousy in the hearts of his brothers. And since they couldn't kill the dream, the brothers decided to kill the dreamer. And they had their chance when Joseph was sent to the desert to find his brothers. In Genesis 37:17-20, it reads like this. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him. Let's throw him in one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. Joseph was a dreamer, and because of that, he now found himself thrown in a deep hole that he couldn't get out of. And what do you think ran through his mind when he was down there? Maybe he thought that there were things in the darkness down there that could do him harm. I don't know. Maybe he thought that he was stuck in the hole for life. Maybe he thought he would die a terrible death. And maybe you had a dream at one time too. Maybe like Joseph, you found yourself in a hole somewhere. Maybe it seems that everyone's against you, that you might get harmed, that you just can't see how you can climb out of the hole that you feel that you're in. And you might not see light at the end of the tunnel, and you might feel like you're buried under the mire, and that can be really depressing, right? But we have good news. Don't give up hope, because if it's the dream that God planted there, he's got a purpose for it. And he's going to bring you through to the other side. He promises, and we stand on his promises. What do you do? What you do today is going to have a direct impact on what will happen to you tomorrow. And that includes perspective. How you relate to those around you now will give you the character and the discipline you will need later on, maybe to fulfill your dream when it doesn't go your way. No matter how deep the hole that you're in seems today, God is telling us, dare to dream, dare to hope in me, dare to stand on those promises. Understand that God is the planter of your dreams. And so as you pursue him, as you seek him, as you pray, as you read his word, he is the giver and you are the receiver. So, the first thing is allow yourself and encourage yourself to be a dreamer again. And the second thing that I want to relay is put your dreams under God's authority. When I graduated high school, I was like most boys. I knew everything. And I let my parents know that I knew everything. I was going to college. I was going to get a job. I was going to get a wife. I was going to start a family. I was going to be financially secure and all by the end of college. And I was going to be my own man. I was going to live my life my own way. And life didn't go my way. And, I found myself with a real heartbreak. And then suddenly, through that heartbreak, God broke in. And he grabbed me. And I became a Christian and put him in the place of authority in my life for the first time. Admitting to him and to myself that I was not the authority that God was. He won, I lost. I never really felt like I had a problem in my life with authority. I really didn't. I always felt that I was pretty much the kind of person that would work with anybody that was over me. But until about 5 years ago, almost to the day, I was jogging on a road in northern Ontario, Canada, and I had an argument with God. Full-blown argument, right there on that country road. He was telling me one thing, and I didn't want to hear it. And I stopped jogging, and I'm sitting there, and I'm arguing with God, and I had no cell phone, I had no earbuds, but I'm verbally talking to God and arguing with him. And he wanted me to forgive some people, and I just didn't want to do it. And so, as usual, I started to rationalize why, and I started to justify myself. I actually stamped my feet. That's probably why the guy coming down the road swerved way to the right and gave me that weird look as he came by. But God won the argument that day, and I was better for it. A funny thing was that later that same year, I was sitting in a counselor's office, whom also happened to be a friend, and he asked me a question, and I got really riled about it. I wasn't necessarily angry, I was just frustrated. And so I got up and I walked back and forth, and he was very alarmed. He looked at me with these big eyes. He says, "Dave, are you angry?" I said, "No, I'm just aggravated. I'm just frustrated." And he told me, "Dave, when you get like that, you look angry and you look scary." And I pushed it aside, and I just said, "Okay, I might be a little angry." And it didn't hit me until several years later. I was talking with one of my sons, and he told me in a heart-to-heart that when I got angry, I looked scary. And it brought me right back to my counselor's words. And it actually caused me to apologize to some people that I had gotten aggravated in front of. And I could say it now that the day my son told me that night I went into the bathroom. I didn't tell anybody this. And I pretended to get angry. And when I did, I was looking at my expression in the mirror. I did it numerous times just to see what I looked like. I wasn't scared. But then again, it was me. I didn't see it, but I realized that I must have this certain look. And it brought to mind again that I had a senior pastor one time who accused me of insubordination, and I was thinking, I was devastated because I hung on every word that this guy had said to me, but maybe he saw my facial expressions, and maybe he interpreted them as somebody that was angry or doing their own thing. I was just doing things that I thought needed to be done. So here's a little side note, and this is why I went off on this little tangent. You might not be hostile toward authority when you stamp your feet and when you look angry. But maybe you are. And maybe that should be a signal to you that you are struggling with authority when you're stamping your feet and when you're getting that look. I did learn a lot on that day on my jog. I learned that I need to submit to authority, especially God's authority in my life, or I get myself into trouble. Romans 13:1 says, "Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Paul says that God was the one who established authorities, and that he repeats that same, and he repeats it in the same verse. And why did he do that? Why did he repeat it in the same verse? He did it because it's really important for us to know and remember that I don't care if you're in the military, it's a job situation, even in a church, there's some kind of authority over you. And so we need to get used to it and come to a place of being submissive to the authority over us, or we're going to be headed down a wrong road. And as we continue to learn about Joseph, we see that he quickly learned how to submit himself to the authority over him. And he understood that all of us have to answer to somebody. Now, you can rebel against authority, you can try to evade it, or you can sit back and complain about it, but the truth is you can never get rid of it. In Genesis 37:13 to 14, it says, "Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," Joseph replied. So his father said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring back word to me." And he sent Joseph off to the valley of Hebron. Joseph was an obedient son. He submitted to his father's authority over him. He was put in a difficult situation because of his proper attitude. Jacob knew his son would do the right thing, would do well. And when we're given a job to do, whether it be by a boss or by God himself, we need to offer up a proper attitude, one that understands that all authority was created by God and that the charge to us is to submit to that authority. Unless the authority over you, who is human, happens to ask you to do something contrary to God's word, because God's authority is over all. But we need to respect those over us. Joseph did. And that is part of what got him to the fulfillment of this dream. And as we become submissive, know that as long as you're working for God, things might not go as smoothly as you desire them to go. But even when we're in the worst of situations, we have to remember to be submissive to him, even when, and this is the third thing, things go from bad to much, much worse. Joseph was a very obedient young man, but you notice that his reward from his brothers was not a dinner thrown in his honor. It was a beating, and it was sold as a slave to strangers from a foreign land. Even when we're in the pits of life, we need to keep our faith in God, because he is working in you and through you, even when you can't see it. We don't know what Joseph was thinking as he stayed in that cistern there, but we do know one thing: God was sending a caravan of merchants to rescue them. His brothers may have demoted Joseph, but they couldn't demotivate him. And he had been treated very rough, but he was still gentle to the people around him. We don't hear about him getting angry and going off. And the traders that bought Joseph took him to Egypt, and they sold him as a slave at an auction. Now remember, Joseph is just 17. He couldn't speak Egyptian. Here he is in the strange land, strange talking people, and he's being sold at a slave market. How could things get any worse? And a very powerful name named Potiphar bought Joseph, and we all heard the story. We know how Joseph came home with him and very quickly realized that he was going to put himself under Potiphar's authority, and Potiphar recognized the capability of Joseph and that he was honest, that he was dependable, so he was blessed. And Potiphar put Joseph in charge of everything, even his entire household. But now Potiphar's wife was not a very nice lady. She tried to seduce Joseph, but Joseph was very trustworthy. And the wife got spurned and claimed that Joseph tried to attack her, and Joseph, however, remained, even in the midst of that, he remained focused on three major principles that seem to be in his life. Keep your word, keep the covenant of marriage sacred, and keep God in charge of your life. And Potiphar had Joseph thrown in prison, and he stayed there for many years, again, going to much, much worse. And his immediate reward for his faithfulness to Potiphar: wrongful imprisonment. Have you ever been falsely accused or attacked? It can turn a normal person very bitter. But Joseph was far from a normal man, because he dared to be a dreamer and trust God. Much of what he learned was from his father, and he put it to work for him as a slave, and he trusted that God was even involved in his life when he was in prison. When Joseph was brought before Pharaoh to interpret a dream, he remained humble, and he said he couldn't do it, but my God can. And even though Joseph's conditions had gone from bad to worse through the years, his attitude and his faith seemed to keep getting stronger. Joseph was finally elevated to the second most powerful man in Egypt, just under Pharaoh himself, but Scripture shows that he always lived at peace with God, as well as non-dreamers. 20-something years following his dream, Joseph arrives at this pinnacle in his life, and as he did, once again, he comes in contact with his brothers. And guess what they did? Remember his dream? Remember Joseph's dream? Since they were visiting the dignitary of a foreign nation, they bowed down to him, just like Joseph had dreamed. And after a few meetings, Joseph revealed his identities to his brother, and they were in shock. And his statement to them reflects, again, his faith that he had in his God and in his heart. And Joseph said to his brothers, "You intended it for harm, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." Joseph showed no animosity, no revenge. He reassured them. He spoke kindly to them. Nobody would have blamed Joseph if he had his brothers punished or even killed for what they'd done to him. But when you have God in your heart, it's hard to be mean to other people. Joseph treated them like family. He talked to them about his great faith, and more importantly, along with talking about his faith, he modeled his faith right in front of them. I can't imagine that those brothers did not become changed by how Joseph treated them. Now, it's time for us to dream again. Unintentionally put yours aside. So whether you're living on cloud 9 or in pit number 3, you don't have to be. That's up to you. If you've been sold out, betrayed, forgotten, ignored, it's time to dream again. And this reminds us of that. Because this lets us know that God is the God of second chances. And this lets us know that you've been forgiven for your past, and that he has a purpose for your life. I don't care where you are in age. If you are here and you have breath of life in you, you have a purpose that God has placed on you. You have a dream that he has planted in your heart, and now it's time for you and I to water it. And that comes with believing God. Purpose. You have a reason. You have a dream for me. And we seek him. We seek the giver of the dream. It doesn't matter if we're starting for the first time or if we're picking that dream back up that we put aside. He wants to do above and beyond anything you can imagine or dream of. That's his promise. That's what we need to stand on. That is what Jesus assures us can happen. So I'm going to close in a word of prayer. I'm going to ask Pete and Nick if you can come up and distribute the elements. Let me pray. Father, we just thank you for being a dream giver. We thank you for what you've planted in our hearts. Lord, I pray that we would nurture that dream. I pray that we would talk to you. We pray we would seek your word. Lord, I pray that you would allow that dream to get tighter and tighter in our hearts. And Father, I pray that we would, above all, not lose faith in what you're doing, even if